So picture this, you're sitting down, you finish your morning business, you hit that flush lever, and then, much to your dismay, you notice water seeping out between the bottom of your toilet and the floor. Here's essentially a cutaway diagram of what the toilet to flange connection should look like. We've got the finished floor on top of which a flange is installed. The toilet outlet sits loosely inside of this, and the space in between the two is filled with your wax ring. Obviously, if this ring is damaged in any way, there's a big opportunity for anything getting flushed to escape. I also have another problem here, in that in my case, the contractor here basically installed the flange to the subfloor, and then the tiler came along and put the finished flooring on top of it. So the flange is sitting about, I don't know, half inch below where it should be. So we're going to replace the wax ring here. We're going to have to add some spacers in there to correct that height difference, and kind of just also end up cleaning up this tile a little bit, because they kind of cut it a little too close where these spacers actually aren't fitting on there properly. So let's jump into all that. The very first thing I'm going to remedy is the distance between the edge of the tile and the flange, because they're bumping up against each other, at least on one side, and the fact the spacers are about 1/8 of an inch larger in diameter. I don't have room for them at the moment, so after suiting up, I'm using a diamond blade on my angle grinder to remove about 1/4 inch of tile. Cutting a circle with a circle can be a little tough, but with some small intermediate cuts you can get it done. And then a little test fit with one spacer confirms I've got enough clearance to proceed. Next, it's time to do a full cleanup. These spacers are sealed with silicone, so we need to make sure we've got a really clean surface to bond to. Start with a good old-fashioned vacuuming to take care of the large particles, and then, assuming you've already got the bulk of the old wax ring removed, go ahead and clean up with some mineral spirits. This does a nice job of removing any lingering wax residue. Next up, I want to dry fit the spacers and ensure that each Johnny bolt is the same distance from the wall. When this measures out correctly, I'm going to use my center punch to mark the location on the flange that needs to be pre-drilled for a couple of screws. It's now time to begin installation. I'll be using a clear silicone from GE, just their basic version for bathroom use. No need to get fancy here. I'll place a link to this as well as the spacers used below. It's an associate link for which the channel will earn a small commission. Use is greatly appreciated. We'll start with a nice thick bead on the flange. We want enough on there to ensure a lot of squeeze out. I'd rather clean up a bit of extra than worry about leaks. Place the first spacer down, repeat the siliconing action for the second layer, and then screw down. If all's gone right, the distance between the wall and the bolts should still be equal, and we can tighten everything down. Clean up the squeeze out, and then take a moment to double check things while the silicone is still setting up here. Here, my flange is now sitting a hair above the finished floor. Would have preferred 1/8 of an inch or so, but this should work just fine as well. We can now dry fit the toilet. The previous installer didn't use any shims, which I suspect is the reason the toilet ultimately worked itself loose and developed a leak. I'll be correcting this with some plastic toilet shims. Once we're happy with the ultimate positioning, we can add our wax ring as usual. It's now looking a lot better, right? Go ahead and reset the toilet. A bit of body weight should be all that's necessary to deform the wax ring and create a liquid and gas tight seal. After placing your shims and verifying even wall spacing, you can now tighten the Johnny bolts. No need to crank them down. Snug is good enough. People have actually cracked their toilets by over tightening these. If you removed the tank as I did, now is a good time to reinstall. Same story as before with the floor bolts. Snug, but not so tight you risk cracking the porcelain. After reinstalling the plumbing, but before sealing it, I gave it a number of test flushes to ensure no water was escaping. And then finally, before our final seal up, go ahead and use a sharp utility knife to trim the shims. To seal the toilet to the floor, I'm using the same clear silicone I used before. Just remember to leave the back quarter or so open. This will allow you to detect any future leaks sooner, hopefully before they become very expensive subfloor problems. And that's about it. Hopefully we don't have to deal with this problem again until we're well into the 2030s. Only final thought is to resist the urge to sit on it before the silicone has had a day or so to fully cure.